Kenyan director and screenwriter. His films created a new wave in cinema and a new genre completely, which is called new or alternate cinema. He's a Padma Shri and a Padma Bhushan recipient and has also been awarded the highest award in Indian cinema for lifetime achievement, the Dada Saheb Phalke Award. He's also won the National Film Award for a Hindi feature film 7 times. He's one of India's most celebrated and decorated directors. I'm talking about none other than Shyam Benegal. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Benegal. This is truly a pleasure, my pleasure, and of course, ET Now's pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Benegal, you know, we all know about your achievements. We know how you've broken barriers with your films. But not all of us know, and definitely not generations that have come much later, don't know about your entire journey. I want you to really relax and flash back and go back to Secunderabad, where I believe you spent your childhood and your formative years.
Well, my father was a photographer, a professional photographer who had a studio. And it was in a place called Tribalgeri, which is very close to Secunderabad. It was in the cantonment area. And so his clients were mainly people from the army. The British Army, of course, British Indian Army earlier, and then post-independence, the Indian Army. And as long as he worked, of course, he had the studio going, and he raised a family of 10 children.
Wow.
And we lived, well, I would say it was kind of lower middle class life, but never feeling a sense of any kind of deprivation, ever. And as far as I was concerned, I was sixth in the family. And I studied up, so I did my MA, and then for a short while taught economics. And then, of course, my ambition was always to be a filmmaker from the very beginning.
Sure.
And I did have a model in my childhood of the kind of person I would like to be. And that happened to be a cousin of mine, a cousin of ours, who already was a very successful filmmaker in Mumbai. Gurudat. And he became a kind of person that I admired most and wanted to be in the kind of profession he was. Although I must confess that I didn't think that he was a particularly brilliant filmmaker.
Okay.
But the fact was that he was a successful one. So he was in many ways a kind of model and a kind of motivation.
I want to focus on your childhood because I believe your father was a very important, factor and influence in you becoming a filmmaker, because I believe he used to make short films on all his children.
Yes. Well, he was an amateur filmmaker in that sense. He used to make films about his children. Although professionally he was a still photographer, but he loved to make little 16mm movies with his camera, with his movie camera. And we had a huge collection of films. And these collection of films really were films about his own children.
Okay.
And that was primarily our entertainment at home. And particularly when we had guests come over of an evening, because these films would elicit from us children not only commentary to what was going on, when films are silent, of course, but it also made for enjoyable kind of commentaries and opinions and views about each other and so on. So that's how, so film was always very familiar.
Part of your culture.
Was very much part of our culture. And then there was a cinema close by. And
before I go to the cinema close by, I believe at the age of 6, you were watching films like Aurat, Sant Tukaram, Admi, which are all, quite heavy for a 6-year-old. And I believe you used to have discussions on the films with your father and your family at the dinner table. Uh, what I found quite amazing and perplexing is how would a 6-year-old understand the plot, the meaning, the depth of the cinema that was being offered then?
On that level, only on that level, on that age level
Okay.
and perception. You know, films were something that we talked about all the time. It was not in many cases, what happens in many families, they separate film and education, and they think film is only entertainment.
Right.
And that's not something that you should be bothering yourself about. We didn't have that kind of problem. And because of that, it became part of our own world. Our world of school and our world of
Cinema.
film, cinema were not different from one another in that sense. The only problem that my mother used to have was saying it may not be good for your eyes to see so many films.
I want to talk to you about, your love affair with Garrison Cinema, which was very close to your home. And I believe that, twice in a month, it was a family affair to go and watch a film. So talk to me a little bit about Garrison Cinema and how it opened up the world of cinema to you.
Well, you see, Garrison Cinema was, as the name suggests, it was the cinema for the army garrison that used to be quartered there, in the cantonment, which meant, of course, when I was a child, the Brits were still around. So the films that used to come were in multiple languages. There were English language films that came for the weekends, and there were Indian language films for the rest of the week, which meant that you had films in Hindi, you had films in Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, Marathi, and hardly any Gujarati films, of course, but certainly English. And I used to see films in a way that you went for a game of football or hockey or gulli danda or whatever, and on your way back from the playground, the theater was there. So one just stood off into the projection room to see what the film was. So the question of seeing films, you didn't need money to go and see a film. One could see it from the projection booth because most of the projectionists happened to be people one knew, So, and then later on, when some of the neorealist films started to come from Italy and so on, that was post-war, in the early 50s, then you also had films by Vittorio De Sica and, the different kinds of films of that nature, which we had never seen in India before. And so there was, that world was opened up. The world of cinema opened up the world for me.
Sure.
As a person, and at a very interesting age, at probably the most impressionable age of all.
But when did it hit you? When did it hit you that, okay, you were interested, we were interested in our childhood in many things. But, how did you convert that into making it a full-time career? When did it hit you that this is what I want to do?
Well, no. I wanted to be a filmmaker from the day I started seeing films.
Which would be?
Which would be, well, from the age of consciousness, as it were. So maybe 6, 7 years of age. But I always knew that I wanted to be a filmmaker, but I wasn't sure how. So in order for that how process to work, I went through my regular education, and in fact...
So you did, physics and math and economics for your master's degree?
I was interested in many subjects, but maths and economics and those things started to fall by the wayside eventually because my interest started to focus entirely on filmmaking. But for films, to make films, you really have to be interested in the world around you, which means you have to be interested in many subjects.
So you finished college, you knew you wanted to be a filmmaker. What did you do next?
Well, that was the big problem, you see, because I knew eventually I wanted to be a filmmaker. But it's not easy to be a filmmaker. It wasn't easy then, it's not easy now.
Sure.
You had to be in the industry to learn even how to write a film script. But because of all those hurdles, uh, you had to sort of train yourself.
Self-taught.
Yeah, you have to teach yourself how to do various things, how to write a script, how to write a scene, how to construct drama, all those kind of things. And then, of course, the camera placements. How do you tell a visual story? How do you tell a story entirely through sound, speech, all these various things.
So when did you start learning these things? Because, I mean, weren't you like any normal young adult who finishes college, in a hurry to get a job and start getting your monthly package?
There's no question of hurry to get a job. Had to get a job.
Exactly, right?
To make a living.
Exactly.
I mean, there was no way you couldn't do that. My first job was as a copywriter.
So you came to Bombay?
I came to Bombay, joined advertising, an advertising agency, as a junior copywriter for a very tiny salary.
So you joined Lintas?
No. Before that, I joined an agency called National.
National.
Yes, and I was there for about 7 or 8 months.
Okay.
On the princely salary of 175 rupees a month.
Okay.
But it helped me a great deal, because I first of all learned how to write copy. But then, of course, the moment I joined Lintas, which happened soon after, that's where I really started to learn. And of course, the people who were there were such wonderfully talented people, like Alec Padam
Sure.
and certainly Jason Pune.
Yeah.
And because of that, my ambition, I came much closer to my ambition because I got the opportunity to write film scripts for advertising films and eventually direct them.
So did you not try and, visit your cousin Guru Dutt and ask him for
I did. That was the first thing I did. He said yes, I could be his assistant. But being an assistant meant he already had 3 assistants. I would have been the 4th.
Okay.
And that wasn't something that I felt was particularly good for me. It wouldn't have worked for me. I used to discuss film a lot with him, but not work with him.
Okay.
His view of films is something different from the way I was looking at films.
Right.
So the correct thing happened, which was that I became a filmmaker on my own.
Sure.
And that, I think, was a very valuable lesson to learn as well.
So then when did your big break come?
My big break came when I made a film called Ankur, which I had written as a script much earlier.
Okay.
And it was because of my advertising and because of the advertising films I was making that I came, face to face with the biggest distributor at advertising films
Okay.
in the country.
Is that okay?
It was a gentleman called Mohan Bijlani. Now, Mohan Bijlani and Srini Varyava, these 2 people, used to run a film publicity and distribution company, only of advertising films. It was called Blaze.
Okay.
Now, Blaze used to they had a near monopoly. They had something like 8,000 to 9,000 cinemas under their control. They used to send advertising films from all agencies to them to distribute, So they were really big. And Mohan Bijlani, he was a friend, and he would always, make fun of me and say, "Hey, when are you going to make your big movie?" That's what he said.
Sure.
One drunken evening, I remember, and he said, "When you make it," I said, "I'll make a film, but you promised me that you will produce it." So he said yes.
Oh, okay. He said yes.
He said yes. And having said yes, he kept his word.
Wow.
So he
Ankur
became
was
my
produced by him.
Yes, Ankur was produced by him. That's why it's Blaze.
Wow.
He not just funded it, he also distributed it.
Would you say Ankur was a commercial success?
Of course it was.
Okay.
Huge success. It was a huge commercial success. It was a huge critical success. It won goodness knows how many awards all over the world.
So you said, would you say Shyam Benegal, was on the map post Ankur?
I think so, yes.
You
The
think
very
so?
first one, yes.
You think so? Did you make money from Ankur?
Not really,
Not really. Okay.
but I made a reputation
Okay.
which was worthwhile. So it was in some ways a kind of insurance that my next few films could be made
Sure.
because of that.
Mr. Benegal, okay, you got your first big break with Ankur, and it was also a grand success. You got your reputation in place. When did you have your first setback?
I mean, I've had setbacks just getting to make Ankur. Because, I carried around that script with me for what? Goodness knows, 13, 14, 15 years before I could make the film.
Sure.
So if that's not difficult enough, what is?
Sure. Yeah.
So you see, it's not always easy. Because, sometimes there are subjects like I made a film called Welcome to Sajjanpur a few years ago. Now, that was a film that I should have actually made 30 years ago.
Why did you say that?
No, I couldn't make it.
You couldn't make it.
I couldn't make it because nobody would want to finance a film like that
You're right.
at that time. So you see, these things happen. At any given time, a filmmaker has 3 or 4 subjects that he's worked on or is working on, and so on and so forth. But not all of them can get made at a given time. Because it's also to do with public sensibility at any given time.
I'd be very interested in your story on how you cast Nasruddin Shah.
Nasir was not only a brilliant student, but he was also a very difficult student. He wasn't the easiest of people. And Girish Karnar was the director of the Film Institute. And I think Nasir ended up by leading a strike or something. And he was really getting into the hair of the director. And but Girish knew that he was a very brilliant actor, and I was looking for actors when I was making a film called Nishant, and I had chosen Girish to act,
Oh, okay.
do the main part in it, and so we were discussing who I should. He said, "Why don't you ask Nasir?" And Nasir was somebody who was giving him a lot of trouble at the institute. So I got Nasir. So Nasir and Girish were both in the film, in Nishan. That's how he came.
Okay.
So it's very odd because there he was the director of the institute, and here was his most difficult.
Just got him off his back.
Got him off his back, and they both got cast in the same film.
Nice, nice. Also talking about what is very interesting, what we now call crowdsourcing, and it's a big buzzword, was, I believe, Manthan, your film, that was on the Gujarat farmers, was actually India's first, I think, and maybe only crowdsourced film.
Properly crowdfunding, but it was done in a different sort of way.
Sure, sure.
Because Dr. Kurian, who happened to be the chairman of the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation at that time, I made 2 documentaries for him, and he said, "Why don't we do a feature film?" So I said, "Fine, but where's the money going to come from?" He said, "Let me ask my farmers." So he asked the 500,000 farmers. He said, "See, you don't have to give money. Contribute, just the milk you give in the morning or in the evening, twice a day, one time. That much money that you are going to get, put it aside for the film," which they did, and we had enough money to make Manthan. So that was, in that sense, it was the first crowd-funded, genuinely crowd-funded film.
What did they get in return?
They got about 10 times more than they put in.
Oh, you gave the money back?
Oh, yes, everything was given back.
Okay.
Dr. Korean did.
Okay.
It was not only a hugely successful film in India,
Mm-hmm.
Gujarat, of course, you expect it to be very successful. Not only was it successful in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad, you couldn't get a lorry that day when the film opened. Because all these lorries were hired by farmers from distant places to bring them to the cinemas in the city to see the film.
Sure.
It was their film.
Sure.
You see, that was the main thing. But what I'm really happy and delighted, and I mean, what was the historic thing about that film was it was a film that finally we showed Dr. Korean actually, and then I was there at the United Nations, New York. We showed it to the General Assembly, UN General Assembly. That was something fantastic.
Sure.
You know, and that was that, and then of course there were many nations, particularly some of the African nations, that used that film for the very same purpose, for to create milk cooperatives in their countries.
Just talking about your discoveries, your interesting discoveries, am I correct to say that, you know, you were looking to cast Wahida Rehman for Ankur, and that didn't really work out because she was busy, and that's when your discovery came in Shabana Azmi?
Yes, well, you see, I was hoping that Wahida would accept to play that part. Unfortunately, I don't think she was quite convinced. I don't know whether she at that time thought that I would be able to make the film. One of my assistants of that time, he had spoken to me about her having come back from the Pune Film Institute and saying she was extremely talented, and she was this extremely talented daughter of this great poet, Kafi Azmi. I said, why don't you bring her to see me, you know, if it is possible. And the moment she came into my office, I knew I had my...
No, is it?
Yes, I had my actor. And that's how it happened. She came to my office and I didn't even have to ask her. When I saw her, I said, I found my Lakshmi.
Wow.
That was the name
Yeah.
in the film for her.
You had also a great working relationship with Smita Patil. Tell me about your, you know, first encounter with her, and then from there on, your working relationship with Smita Patil.
Well, you see, she was among the most unlikely of stars in that sense. Sure. Because, you know, nobody, she had a very symmetrical face. And a lot of people think that asymmetrical faces don't work. But she was an extremely attractive person. And for the camera just fell in love with her. You know, in front of the camera, she'd just get transformed. And she was an ideal actor for a director. She was like plasticine in the hands of a director.
Wow.
She'd do exactly the way a director wanted her to. And you know, because she trusted the director so much, you also felt so responsible. Because if you don't match that trust, then you know it's all gone, finished. Because I remember when I was doing Bhumika, which was a very big part for her, I mean, which was probably the best part she'd ever played. Here she was, I was wanting her to learn how to fence. You know, so I had a fencing master for her. And I had an assistant of mine, another person who was wonderful. Mandeep was very fond of Mandeep Thakkar was his name, and he was very fond of Smita. So instead of going for fencing lessons, she used to go with Mandeep, teaching him how to drive in the morning or some such thing, you know. And it would rattle me so much, I cannot tell you. I get so upset because here was the fencing master waiting for her to teach how to fence. And there she's going on Marine Drive with a car trying to teach my direction assistant how to drive. You know, it's completely crazy, mad, you know.
Tell me, Mr. Benegal, would you say that you were a better director or a better father in terms of roles?
I agree. It's very difficult to tell, but I probably, I'm still learning to be a proper father.
That's funny.
Although my daughter's properly grown up, but even then I'm not quite sure that I will be ideal father.
On that note, thank you so much, Mr. Benegal. It has been wonderful chatting. It has been completely my pleasure. And I hope, generations that have not witnessed your cinema listen to this conversation and relook some of those old classics we had because of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.